So I'm very happy to be here. Let me just get this presentation started. Oops, wrong one. There we go. So I already talked about that. So I'm here with Drew Robbins, and as I mentioned before, I'm the program manager for ASP.NET MVC and NuGet. So in this first session, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the web platform as a whole, and then I'll go a little bit into some introductory material on MVC. Later today, I'll be talking about more advanced MVC, NuGet, Razor, and I believe that's it. If you have any questions at any time, feel free to ask. I want to keep this somewhat informal. And if you're tweeting about this, use the hashtags webcams. So there's a lot of content that we'll go through, and there's a lot of content that we won't have time to cover. So you can go to webcamps.ms, and you can go to training.webcamps.ms, and you can get this content. So I talked about this. So the products that I work on fit in this larger stack, this larger framework of tools that you can use. So we have one of the best ways to get all those tools is the web platform installer. So at the foundation of our stack is IaaS, or Internet Information Services. So this is the web server that runs everything that I build and a lot of our other products. And it's also the way that you can get the web platform installer and other really cool modules. On top of that, we have SQL Server. And what's nice about SQL Server is we have the enterprise one that everyone's familiar with, the one you run on your server and you can power really large enterprise sites. But recently we've come out with SQL Server Compact Edition, or what sometimes we call SQL CE. And the real nice thing about SQL CE is that it's a file-based in-proc database. So it's really great for development. One of the problems I've always run into is when I want to get someone else developing really quickly on my product, I have to give them a set of steps to set up, and I always tell them, make sure you have SQL Server set up, and here's the connection string. But with SQL CE, you can just package it in as part of your project, tell them, go to the source control, get latest, and you're good to go. In fact, we've also done that with IaaS in that we now have IaaS Express, and it's the same approach. You can tell people to, it's now a built-in web server for Visual Studio 2010 SP1, and it's really nice because unlike Cassini, which is kind of a rude approximation of IaaS Express gives you all the settings that you want. If you need to test out your SSL connection, you can configure IaaS Express for that by just having a self-issued certificate. So on top of that, we have ADO.NET Entity Framework. And ADO.NET Entity Framework, or what we just call EF for short, I'll be very honest with you, when it first came out, it was a bit rough. And there's a lot of people who didn't really like it. So we've been working with this team, and they've been putting a lot of effort into EF code first. And what EF code first is it allows you to write your code first, such as plain old CLR objects or POCO objects, and then it will dynamically generate your database based on some conventions and those objects. And you can also use attributes to specify specifics that you want. And it's a really nice programming model, much better than what came before. And it's something that works really nicely with my product, ASP.NET MVC. And on top of that, we have ASP.NET. And ASP.NET incorporates several technologies, depending on the style of development you want to do. And I'll talk about that a little later. And on top of that, we have Ajax Control Toolkit and jQuery. So one interesting thing about that is that you may have noticed that we're starting to include jQuery with nearly all of our products. All of our project templates for both MVC and web forms have jQuery in them. And we have one member of the ASP.NET team who's actually a core member of the jQuery team. So we are really committed to jQuery, and we are looking at it as the future of our JavaScript and Ajax stack. So when we took a step back recently, and we looked at the different profiles for people who build web applications. And we saw a few patterns that emerged. So we've got people who like to draw on a window. And so I think he represents the guy who wants to easily create simple websites. See, that site looks very simple, right? And they want to share information about their hobbies, or share photos, or just build something, just to try it out. What you might call the hobbyist, or the hobbyist developer. Which is interesting because I'm completely backwards. So this guy, he's obviously drawing a UML diagram, so he must be a professional software developer. And he builds large-scale websites with a team of developers. And then we have librarians who love web apps. So she just needs a tool to put content on the web. And then we have kids who like to paint themselves. And he wants to build websites himself and use an easy-to-learn tool. And so one of the things we wanted to focus on is making sure that we had products that covered the entire spectrum of personas. So no matter what kind of developer you are, we want to make sure that you have the full benefit of ASP.NET. So a lot of times people will frame ASP.NET MVC versus ASP.NET Web Forms versus ASP.NET Web Pages, which is our newest offering. But under the hood, under the core, it's all ASP.NET. So you can see here that the core includes all of these different technologies: caching, pages, profile, intrinsics, modules, controls, roles, and so on. And we're constantly investing in this core as well and trying to make improvements. One of the things I hear a lot about is that our membership could be improved. So that's one thing we're going to work on. We're going to make that better. And the main thing about this is that if you're choosing between MVC or web forms or web pages, the nice thing to know is that all of this is still there for you. All of this has been baked into the framework for 13 years of optimizations and improvements. So you have the ability to use that from any of our technologies. So the first choice on there, on top of ASP.NET Core, is Web Forms. How many of you here are doing Web Forms development? Okay. Good. So Web Forms is our sort of rich, control-driven presentation framework. So you drag a set of controls, or you don't have to drag them. You can just type them up. But you get controls on a page. There's a whole control lifecycle and postback model. And for those who started off in Visual Basic desktop development, it actually fits very much close to that model. Some of the downsides to it, though, is that if you started off as a web developer doing PHP or classic ASP, it's actually somewhat of a different model than what you're used to. And so that's why we came out with ASP.NET MVC. ASP.NET MVC is meant to give you full control of the markup. There's a little more work you have to do sometimes for some scenarios, but we're actually trying to make even that be much better. But it fits more naturally with the way the web works. Request comes in, response goes out, you're done. There's no life cycle, there's no control eventing or any of that stuff. And then most recently, just in last January, we came out with ASP.NET Web Pages. A lot of times people look at them as, they confuse that with Web Matrix because the two are really well tied together. So Web Matrix is the IDE, or the integrated development environment, that hosts ASP.NET Web Pages as well as other technologies. And I think later today, Miguel will talk about Web Matrix in more depth. But the nice thing about Web Matrix is you can also build PHP sites in it as well as ASP.NET Web Pages. Our goal with ASP.NET Web Pages was to provide a very simple way of getting started with web development. When you were first learning web development or first learning even how to program, you didn't start off with dependency injection and UML and all these, you didn't read the Gang of Four design patterns, right? You just wrote like console.write hello world, and that was it.